Ever wonder why one of your kids is a total social butterfly and the other is just perfectly happy playing by themselves? Or why one kid falls into a sleep schedule like clockwork, while the other's patterns are a complete mystery? Well, we're about to dive into the science behind your child's unique personality, and trust me, it might just change the way you see everything about parenting. All right, so let's get right into it. We're going to tackle that classic question that pretty much every parent asks themselves, usually in the middle of a very long night. So here it is, the famous nature versus nurture debate. Is your child's personality just hardwired from birth, or is it all about how you parent them? For decades, people have argued back and forth. But what if that's the wrong question entirely? What if the answer isn't a simple either-or?
Well, that's exactly what two psychiatrists, Thomas and Stella Chess, started thinking. They came up with this revolutionary idea that the secret to a child's happiness and success wasn't just their nature, and it wasn't just their nurture. Nope, it was the fit between the two. And that, right there, was a total game changer.
And listen, they didn't just pull this idea out of thin air. Their conclusions were based on this massive, groundbreaking project called the New York Longitudinal Study. Starting way back in 1956, they followed over 100 infants all the way into their 20s. We're talking decades of data. This wasn't some quick snapshot. It was a whole life story told through science.
So, after all that research, they were able to start decoding a child's innate behavioral style. And they gave it a name: temperament.
Now, this definition is really key. Temperament isn't about what a child can do, their skills or abilities. And it's not about why they do things, their motivation. It's all about the how. It's their personal style of approaching and reacting to everything in the world. And they broke down that how into 9 different traits. These are kind of like the building blocks of temperament. You've got everything from their physical activity level to how regular their sleeping and eating patterns are, their general mood, and even how easily they get distracted or, how long they can stick with the puzzle. So by looking at all these 9 traits, they started to see patterns. And they found that about 2/3 of the kids in their study fit pretty neatly into one of 3 general types. You had the easy child who's pretty positive and adaptable, then the difficult child who has more irregular patterns and really struggles with new stuff, and finally the slow to warm up child who adapts pretty slowly and is kind of hesitant at first.
Okay, I have to pause here because this is so important. Those labels, especially the word difficult, can sound really harsh, right? They're not meant to be value judgments. They're just clinical descriptions. In fact, a lot of people today prefer to use words like spirited or intense. This isn't about a kid being good or bad. It's just about understanding their natural style. And get this, a huge chunk, more than 1/3 of kids, are actually a combination of these types, which honestly just goes to show how wonderfully unique every single kid is. There's really no one-size-fits-all box.
But you know what? The most important thing they discovered wasn't these categories, not even close. It was something way more powerful and way more useful for parents. This is the real aha moment of the whole study. They called this idea goodness of fit. And it's this simple but totally profound concept. A child's well-being really depends on how well their personal temperament matches their environment, and that includes the people and the expectations around them. This is the insight that really changes everything.
Think about it like this. A poor fit is when there's a clash. Let's say you have a super active, high-energy kid who lives in a tiny apartment where they're constantly told to be quiet and sit still. That's a poor fit. But a good fit, that's when you take that same kid and make sure they get tons of time at the playground to run and climb and just burn off all that amazing energy. Same kid, different fit, and you get a much, much happier outcome.
And this applies to people too, not just places. Imagine you're a really outgoing parent. You love big parties, you thrive on social energy. But your child is slow to warm up, and big groups of strangers make them feel totally overwhelmed. Well, if you keep pushing them to be a little social butterfly, it's just going to lead to frustration and conflict for both of you. That's another example of a poor fit.
So, the crucial takeaway here is that you are not stuck with a poor fit. Not at all. You can actually actively change things, the environment, your expectations, to create a better one. And the really great news, it's not as complicated as it sounds.
It really just boils down to a simple 3-step process. First, just observe your kid. Get to know their temperament without judging it. Second, get honest about your own temperament. Are you high energy, super mellow? And third, use what you've learned to consciously adapt the environment to support your child's natural style. And we're talking about really practical stuff.
For that high-energy kid, maybe you hit the playground before you drag him grocery shopping. For a kid who's slow to adapt, you give them a heads up and lots of details before you go somewhere new. Got a sensitive child? Maybe you visit the museum on a quiet Tuesday morning instead of a chaotic Saturday afternoon. See? These are small tweaks that can prevent huge meltdowns. And the payoff for making these changes is enormous. When you work to create a good fit, you get out of those constant power struggles. You build this amazing foundation of trust because your child feels seen and understood. And maybe most importantly, you boost their self-esteem because you're literally setting them up for success in a world that feels made for them.
Ultimately, what this all comes down to is perspective. Understanding temperament gives you the power to have more realistic expectations. It allows you to parent the child you actually have with all their amazing strengths and unique quirks instead of the child you might have imagined. It lets you swap frustration for empathy.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. Because recognizing your child's temperament isn't about putting them in a box or making excuses. It's about seeing them more clearly. And that understanding, well, that's the first and most powerful step toward creating a world where your child can absolutely shine.